another episode of the Power of Girlhood's YouTube series. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge our sponsors, Lawrence Technical University, Inside Out Literary Arts, Black Girl Magic, AFS, Student Travel Abroad, Life on Purpose, Popsy Digital Marketing, Indigo Woman, and Fair Ventures. Today, I will be interviewing Shayna Renee Hammond and Amelia Duran to recognize the power moves they make in their community while appreciating their leadership roles in activism, entrepreneurship, aids, and creativity through different mediums. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves, then go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here. My name is Shayna Renee Hammond. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business 10 years ago. It's called Lead for Liberation. We focus on organizational redesign. So, organizations that want to shift their culture through the lens of liberation. That's what we do for foundations, school districts, and nonprofits. And then my second love in the business world, anyway, is Indigo Women. I started Indigo Women 2 years ago. It's specifically for Black women in leadership. I'm a leadership coach and a spiritual life coach. And I just love, nothing brings me more joy than seeing especially Black women thrive. And I'm also a mom of two middle school children.
Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Naomi. Nice to meet you, Shayna.
You
My
too.
name is Amelia Duran. I'm born and raised Southwest Detroiter. My father was a Latin American musician from Chile, so I have strong roots in Latin America as well. But basically, my life, I've been invested in community work through different types of initiatives, whether it was subsidized housing and infrastructure improvement, to later on then going on to work at Wayne State University, doing college access work for the Center for Latino Studies. But currently, I am the director of Garaje Cultural, which is an arts and cultural center that was founded by my father 10 years ago here in Southwest Detroit. And Garaje is basically kind of a place to uplift all of the cultural traditions of the Southwest population, mostly Latino arts, but obviously interconnected to different types of populations and diversity here in our community. Because if you know anything about Southwest, it's not just a bunch of Latinos here. There's people of all ethnic backgrounds in Southwest Detroit. And so we pride ourselves in being a center that tries to uplift the connections between the different types of populations here in our community. So we've done a lot of things, public art, murals is a big one in Southwest through an initiative called Art on the Block. And then, just teaching classes in the past. We've had, a little bit of a hiatus with that because of the pandemic. But we have a new space now. And so we're starting to kind of figure out where we're going for the next 10 years. I'm mom as well, Shayna, but my son is 24, so sometimes I forget. Very different than middle schoolers.
Yes.
Not too far away. So
Thank you guys so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to interview you guys today. Our first question is activism through creativity is very liberating. What was the journey like, and what are some things that are good rules to live by when you guys can continue to elevate in leader and mentorship roles?
I think what comes to mind when you say that is self-liberation. Something that I've done that's probably one of the most liberating things as an activist, as an artist. I forgot to mention I'm an author. I just published my first book, thank you, in January. It's called Becoming an Indigo Woman, How to Thrive in Leadership in Life. And it's really a call to center self-care and to really focus and prioritize, especially as women, to prioritize our care and self-love, and how all liberation and change first starts from within and starts from the individual. And so every time I level up in any kind of leadership role or want to make a difference, I first start with me. And that book is kind of like I kind of call it like your coach in your pocket, if you will. I wrote it like a coaching engagement. And it's just a place to go to when you're feeling like, overwhelmed, or you're trying to bring a change to fruition, or you're trying to create something and it just won't come out. Sometimes that just means you need to get still and really, go within and get inspiration from a greater power.
I love that so much.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Shayna, and congratulations on the
Thanks.
book.
Thank
I'll get
you.
my hands on a copy. I feel like for me, arts and culture is it's like for my family, I feel like something that we live and breathe, but it's also something that is very deeply connected to political struggle. In Latin America, we say the walls speak to you. They show messages of resistance, messages of hope, and things like that. And so when we started doing muralism, street art in our community, it really was kind of a way for us to put a different kind of message on the walls that would inspire hope in the population. Growing up in Detroit, there were a lot of things that weren't necessarily really pretty to look at, right? In our surroundings. And that I think sometimes speaks subliminally to you in ways that are not always positive. And so for me, art and culture has always been a way to resist the things that try to keep us as communities disenfranchised or oppressed. I think it's challenging because when you get political, there's a lot of different opinions, and so community work through the lens of arts and culture that is infused with a different kind of liberation theory always kind of has to kind of be the middle bridge, right? Meeting people where they're at and hoping that you're sparking some kind of questioning, some kind of need to analyze the things around us that don't make sense to us, the things that we know are harmful to our communities. And so for me, it's really about using art as a tool for self-empowerment, but also for collective empowerment, and to encourage people to think outside of the things that I would describe as being part of the status quo, right? A lot of effort is always placed on electoral politics. And for me, that's always been challenging to kind of navigate because I really do believe that our liberation will come from an understanding that we have to step outside of the norms and the structures that exist around us that want us to believe that the path to liberation is really slow and long. And rather than being, capable of being quick and immediate when people and communities take power into their own hands. So I don't know if that was even answering your question because it's hard sometimes when you're in an interview. It's like you get the first beat of the question and then you forget what the second part is. So
I feel you.
Here I thought I needed to go when it comes to art and culture and liberation and politics. That's kind of where I'm grounded and where I try to ground our work as a center.
I think you guys both answered that beautifully. Like, it does, like, art and culture is a very big part of activism, especially that's what I just grew up in. Okay, so our next question is, what inspired you ladies to become part of these art leadership and education communities? And is this your dream career? Nobody wants to ask people that anymore.
Yeah, I love that
I
question.
just think that's a really, because like you can be 25 and 26 and still be like, I don't know like if this is my career, like if this is my dream career or not. So.
Yeah. I'll go first, maybe, Shayna.
Sure, yeah.
Because I feel like for me, I don't know that it was necessarily ever a choice. Like I feel like in some ways, the position that I carry right now and the place in which I exist, like in community, has been very organic and very gradual just because of the fact that, my father was a musician, an artist. My father was embedded in, politics in Latin America when we were living there in the 80s. So it's very natural for me. Like, I did a lot of different things in my life, from, 20 to maybe 35. But at 35, I kind of made a decision to dive into this work fully because I felt like I was always being pulled in too many directions. You have like your professional 9 to 5, and then you have community work, and then you have arts and culture. And so it was just kind of like always very overwhelming to try to like navigate the different worlds. And so at some point it was kind of like a natural progression for me to take on this role and to understand what it means for me personally, what it means for my community, and in some ways the privilege that it is to be a part of a legacy of work that has been embedded within one family in our community. So I'm grateful, but there are times where I'm like, did I have a choice? I don't know if I had a choice, and I also don't know how to stop doing what I do. So I think for everybody, it's a different path, but it doesn't really matter what path you were on that landed you in a position where you believe that another world was possible, as long as you get there.
I love that, Amelia. It sounds like you're living in alignment with your journey. And
I
that's
hope so.
beautiful. It's like it shows you. I kind of feel the same way. Whenever I think about, what inspired me to do what I've done, and it's evolved over time. So we're going to go on a journey. I'm going to start with the first day of school, because that's really where I think it all started for me. So I was born in Detroit. I reside now in Washington, D.C. We'll talk about how I got from Detroit to D.C. But my first day of school was actually not in Detroit, though. So I was only in Detroit until I was maybe 2 years old. My father went to Wayne State Law School, and he got his first law clerk job in Pinckney, Michigan. Pinckney is a very rural town. For anyone who's not familiar with Pinckney, usually people make that face that Amelia just made. When I mention Pinckney, I am sure we were likely the first Black family to ever set foot in Pinckney, possibly the last. And my first day of school, I got on the bus and all the students moved to the edge of their seats and no one let me sit down. The white woman bus driver said nothing. She just kept driving and watched me cry and sway up and down the aisle without doing anything. So my introduction to school and race was very dramatic. It was very, it's a moment that I think about and call upon. But I remember in that moment thinking, why? Like, I haven't said a word. And they were shouting all kinds of things at me, monkey, nigger. They were throwing things at me. And I had no idea what those terms meant. I did not know. I was 5 years old. I didn't know why they hated me. I just knew that for whatever reason, my presence was creating this really strong emotion. My dad had a conversation with the bus driver the next day, and it was decided that I would have an assigned seat behind the bus driver. So I sat behind the bus driver for the rest of that year by myself. No one ever sat next to me. And so I felt the very kind of extreme feeling of exclusion very early on. So we didn't stay in Pinckney long. We were there for maybe just that school year. And then we moved about a year and a half later, got another job in Okemos, Michigan. So Okemos is like your typical suburb and outside of Lansing. And by that time, I was one of maybe 4 to 5 Black families in the school. And so I experienced more of the implicit biases. I was always kind of seated in the back. I was always kind of made to feel like I didn't really belong. There was a different tone that many of the teachers used with me. I was tracked into all the lowest reading and math groups, and I just thought school just wasn't for me. And so we stayed there in Okemos from, I'd say, first grade until the beginning of 5th grade. Then my father got his dream job in Washington, D.C. So my father is actually a Washingtonian. It's my mother who's from Detroit. And so he got his dream job back in his hometown of right here where I am now in Washington, D.C. And they enrolled me in DC public schools, and I had my first Black teacher, Mr. Beasley, 5th grade. I will never forget him. He literally changed everything. He was the first teacher to really see me as a human. He could tell I had very low self-esteem by that point, didn't really like school. And he had these 2 practices that I still do today. One is he made us journal every single day without fail. He would give us prompts. I'm an avid journaler and writer now because of that. And he also made us read the newspaper. And we had to take a stance. And we had to understand, though, both sides. He's like, you need to make sure you understand the multiple perspectives happening currently in your world. And you need to take a stand. And he periodically would read our journals about the different stances we were taking. And I'll never forget, at one point, he wrote back and said, "You're a true leader." And I thought to myself, I'm quiet. I try not to make any noise. I like, how am I a leader? Like, I'm not a leader. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he said, Shayna, I see what you write about in your journals, and I see how you treat people. You are a leader. And that completely kind of changed my concept around leadership. And I didn't necessarily, I started kind of broadening what leadership actually meant, beyond just kind of being the person who maybe, gets the best grades or is the loudest. And he really, challenged that and said, no, it's really actually about how you make people feel. And it's actually about how you can articulate a certain stance, and while also understanding the opposing viewpoint. And that never, never left me. So I actually became a teacher. First is how my career began. I definitely channeled Mr. Beasley, and I became a high performing teacher right out the bat. My second year, I won some awards for my students having the greatest academic gains, and for our culture being so positive, and our students doing so incredibly well. I became a principal at age 25, because of those results. And the school that I led in Baltimore became the highest performing. And that just kept snowballing. And then, I started coaching other school leaders and principals, young principals, and then started Lead for Liberation, first focusing on educators and principals, and giving them the kind of coaching I wish I had had. And now that has snowballed into a coaching practice for Black women in leadership. And so I think of my career as ever evolving, but I always go back to that experience in Pinckney, Michigan, where I understood in a really strong way the importance of understanding who you are, and understanding the context that's happening outside of you. And regardless of, what other people are kind of bringing to the table, staying rooted in self-love and who you are, and creating containers that actually do the opposite and bring out the best in people. And that's what I'm committed to do from here on out.
Beautiful. Oh my God, I love that story. I mean, I hate all of the feelings that you were made to feel in those othering situations, but your path obviously was like, what does it call it? Emboldened by it, and that's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Like, I grew up in I went to a lot of different schools and was around I went to a predominantly white school for many years, and switched schools, and I always wanted to be a film director. But in the back of my head, I was like, I have to do something that aligns with all of the people that I'm inspired by. And those are women in activism. So, like, just advocating for what we believe in is something really important. So, what are 3 things you would tell your 20-year-old self, whether they are mantras or advice? I'm 20. I could use the advice. So, yes.
Yes. So I think I would tell my 20-year-old self first that try not to use the word should. Your path is your path. It doesn't matter what your friends are doing, peers are doing, your parents did. It just own your path, and it can look any way you want it to look. And only you can really decide whether it's the path for you. So go at your own pace, develop your own path. Try not to say the word should, throw it out the window, and just follow your gut. The other thing, it's funny, I told my my 13 and 11-year-old this not too long ago, and they're like, Mom, we're 13 and 11. Like, why are you saying this right now? Like, we're 13 and 11. I was like, well, because I didn't know this, and I wish I had known this. And it really also is, I was really explicit with my children that I didn't expect them to grow up and get married and have children. I think that we're all told that that's the path, that at some point you are supposed to get married, you're supposed to have children. And again, it kind of goes back to path. It really doesn't have to be that way. And I wanted to make sure they knew that that wasn't necessarily an expectation of me, and that they had full agency to decide what it means for them to come into full adulthood. Full adulthood does not necessarily mean those two things. So I wish I had known that, at 20. And I think I would have made some different decisions and been a little bit more bold and confident in my early 20s had I really owned that, this is my path and I don't have to follow what maybe I see around me, and really trust myself. I think that was 3 in there.
Great. I'm making a mental note in the back of my head. Like, okay.
Man, these kinds of questions always trip me up a little bit because when I think back to that time of my life, like it wasn't a very happy time, you know. But I definitely do feel like it was a time that created, a lot of who I am, the good and the bad, So first, I think I would tell my 20-year-old self, and I'm around a lot of 20-something-year-olds. And I don't like necessarily the title of like mentor. Like I appreciate it, but I also feel like I'm a peer. I learn from young people just as much as I hope that they learn from me, and I try to show them that I'm really just an older version of you. No sugarcoating it. Like acknowledging that we all have some scars and some things that we need to find healing from. And so first, I think I would say slow down. Life comes at you really fast, and it can be really hard. I was a mom by 18. 20, I was trying to prove myself to the world, so that those like stigmas and stereotypes that people wanted to place on me because of the decisions that I made that were partially influenced just by the conditions around me and what other people my age were also doing in the 90s, in Detroit. So yeah, like slow down, enjoy the journey. Don't be in such a rush to get to something because I'm 43 now, and I understand that life kind of feels a lot like a book, right? Like it feels like there's chapters to the story of you, and they all are building onto something, or teaching you something, leading you to kind of the place that you need to go to be able to learn the next lesson. And I expect that to be true of my life for like every next decade that I am able to live and breathe in this realm. So slow down. There was another one and now I'm losing it. But like, I think when I think to like my generation, I don't know that I feel like we had as much freedom as this generation or these newer generations have in terms of just standing in their own truth of who they are, and being able to create themselves, and project themselves out into the world in a way that is creative and freeing. So never stop creating the you that you want to become. Never let yourself be put into a box or stigmatized, stereotyped, whatever. Just always be true to yourself and break those molds, whatever mold it is that someone's trying to put you in. And yeah, I can't remember what the third one is, guys. I'm gonna have to flake on the third one.
Okay.
But those are, yeah, I'm sure there's a third one in there somewhere.
I love all those answers, and of course, I am just going to think about those all the time. So, this is our last question, and I think this is a really important question, but what does a perfect community look like to you, and what do you envision?
So you want me to take this one, Amelia, first?
Yeah.
Okay. We actually talk a lot about this at my first organization, Lead for Liberation. And part of the definition for workplace liberation we give is that it's when everyone in the community is thriving, when everyone in the community is free to innovate, and when everyone in the community feels like they belong. So thrive, innovate, and experience belonging is what we aspire to and how we describe a liberated community. And we spend a lot of time helping folks both dismantle old practices and beliefs and that are rooted and grounded in white supremacy, and really get them thinking even beyond equity and into liberation, and like, what does it mean for everyone to be free, truly free, to bring their full selves to work, their full talents, to also have a workplace where they're invited to bring their talents and artistry that might not be like apparent on their resume, or an experience, or being a middle child, and bringing that to the place. And so when I think about perfect, I usually use the word liberated, because to me, that's really what it's about. Like, I think in life in general, we're all here to thrive. We're all here to experience joy. And unfortunately, joy is tougher for some of us, right, than others. And that's by design, and that is on purpose. And it shouldn't be that way. So I always think about, from an artist standpoint, I think about sunflowers, when I think about the perfect community, because sunflowers exemplify joy, right? And to me, like, the liberated perfect community is when everyone has equal access to joy. We're far from that. There are, container after container after container is getting closer to making sure their specific containers are filled with joy and everyone has equal access to joy. But that's what I think about.
That's beautiful. We'll just go with Shayna's answer. No, no, I feel like I think I spend a lot of time kind of daydreaming in my head about what an alternate reality of the world looks like, right, and feels like, because I think, it always feels a little gaslighting. The world feels like it's trying to tell you that it's not something that it is, because you experience it, right? And
Yes.
and it's not always a good feeling, right? And so, like, I imagine a world where or a community, I guess, or just an existence in which, sometimes, I look at people and the people that they look up to, and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it, because if I go in the rabbit hole, it's very deep, and the people that you think are leaders, or are people to be admired, in many ways are complacent to the system, right? And perpetuating all of the things that keep us from actually being able to live out, in community, live out the reality that we want to within our communities, in a way that feels more liberated, the way that Shayna described. So yes, I feel like one where you're able to thrive, where the value of your labor is not, necessarily, quantified, through economics that are oppressive, where people that are in positions of power and leadership are people that I actually can admire and look up to, that live by the values that they spew. Because a lot of people say a lot of things, but they don't really mean anything, in terms of our, material conditions as, working class people. So, so yeah, I mean, I think, like, simple stuff, like, when everybody's like upset about the queen, I'm like, no, I don't want what I'm not upset about the queen. But what does it feel like to live in a world where someone of that, kind of positioning and placement in the world actually was somebody that I admired, right? It'd be somebody
Right.
that doesn't do all of the things that the queen, was in cahoots with a colony of doing, right? And so, uh, there's lots of things that we could imagine an alternative reality. So maybe we need to make that book happen, Shayna.
Yes. I love how you lifted
But
values. That's
yeah,
Values are everything.
they are. And they're hard
Mhm.
they're hard to define. A lot of times we have
Yeah.
conversations in community about our values, and I'm like, what are they exactly? Can we write them down like the 10 Commandments?
Yes.
But they're just kind of an ethos, right? Like, sometimes
Mhm.
they're not quantifiable, they're qualitative, right? And so,
Mhm.
you just move in the world in a way that you hope is not harming anybody, and pray for a day when everybody else has the freedom to move that way too.
Awesome. Yes.
You guys had such amazing answers. I'm, of course, taking all of this in. I'm so thankful that I was able to interview you guys. We have 29 minutes and 13 seconds. Before we
Hey.
part ways, I want to remind our viewers or anyone watching that International Day of the Girl is October 11th, 2022. Please head over to LinkedIn and follow the Power of Girlhood and give us a follow on IG and Her Voice Project to join us. And happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Also, Shayna's book, Becoming an Indigo Woman, is published. Do you know where, is it on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon, and it's also, on Target, at Target online as
Oh,
well.
cool.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay. So it was amazing to meet you guys, to interview you guys, and the leadership and the advice that I was able to just get from you guys was absolutely amazing.
Oh, I'm
Thank
glad.
you,
Thank you so
Naomi.
much for having us. This was
Yeah.
such an honor.
Yeah. And I mean, you're 20 years old and you're already doing it, right? Like, so I'm excited to see what happens with your future film productions.
Thank you.
Any help in that? I'm not a film person, but I'm around a lot of creatives. So hopefully we can connect in real life sometime. And our hashtag, well, not hashtag. See, this is how you know I'm 43 because I don't know.
I'm right there with you.
Our Instagram is Garage Cultural. We're not the best at social media, but we try to put the happenings on there as much as we can. And so connect with us, come visit us. We'd love to do some things together.
Do you have a social media handle, Shayna?
I do. You can find at Indigo Women Community on Instagram. You can find out all about what we're doing and all the wonderful juiciness we're putting out into the world. You can also find out more about Lead for Liberation at our website, leadforliberation.com. We are also on LinkedIn, and you can also find us on Facebook.
Have a great day, guys. It was amazing to meet you guys.
Thank you so much again for having us.
Of course.
Fun.
Be safe.
You too.